and not be affected by it. And so I've been enormously privileged to be able to work with and learn from the folks I've been able to learn from and work with for the last decade and a half. And there is so much traditional knowledge with respect to fire and so many other things that is incredibly relevant for settlers, non-native communities to become aware of. I think, many people think of climate change as an extension of colonialism. And in that sense, Indigenous communities have been on the forefront of resisting and thinking about alternatives and how we need to change course for a long time. And there's a great deal to learn from, and I think it's incumbent upon us, the non-native environmental movement, to be following the lead of Indigenous communities.
Do you think that we are listening enough?
I think that there's some sign that change is happening, but I think absolutely not. The dynamics, both cultural and political, are very different between Canada and the United States on this one. But there's very limited awareness of the ongoing existence of Indigenous communities, what their struggles look like, much too little sense of other, whether it's environmental groups, understanding how the things they advocate for can actually increase harm in Indigenous communities. And there's a huge amount of learning and work to be done.
I was just thinking about social justice and climate change and wondering if the fix for humanity is a technological fix or whether it's just simply asking the elders.
Well, we're living in a time when the kind of wisdom that Indigenous communities have had is a very different kind of time. And so one of the things I think that's true for many traditions, I was just at a friend's bat mitzvah 2 days ago, and this 13-year-old was tasked with figuring out how do those texts, what do we draw from them today? And I think that certainly Indigenous communities are taking those kind of steps themselves. And so there is a lot of wisdom in figuring out how we change, how we draw upon that today is a task at hand. And so as a sociologist, we think about technological fix. Technologies are very shaped by the social conditions within which they're in, and in turn make new social conditions. So I don't think that you can have a technological fix on its own from within a system that's organized around fossil fuel and capitalism and all of the growth imperative. Technologies are not going to change that. We have to have cultural shifts as well, but technologies can lead to cultural shifts if they're done in that with that intention or introduced.
Kari, a couple of last questions. One is, who are the people that influence you the most in your work?
Thank you for asking that. Well, certainly, there's so many people who I draw upon, and for any of us, we're only able to do the thinking that we're doing because of the people around us and the people that have walked before us, and the people that walk alongside us now. So certainly, my Karuk colleagues are enormously influential on a day-to-day basis in terms of the particular of knowledge that they have, but also their integrity and approach to their work and to life. And, both my parents were very influential to me in terms of the idea that we have a responsibility to give back to the world, as well as, other mentors, people in the academic community.
Any suggested authors? Any faves?
I love the work of Robert J. Lifton, who has a new book out called The Climate Swerve. And I also leaned heavily, he doesn't do climate work, but Eviatar Zerubbabel does work on the social organization of denial, that for listeners may be a little too far off. And then in terms of just people who are struggling to make sense with climate change, I really like Rebecca Solnit's work. I have here on my shelf her book, Hope in the Dark, but she's done many other things, Paradise Built in Hell. And I also I don't read all of Derek Jensen's work, but he has an older essay called Beyond Hope, which is short and quite wonderful.
And what's on your wish list? The things you'd like to see changed. What do you think's manageable?
Well, I don't know. I think none of us know what we can do, but we need to figure out what to do anyway. We don't have the luxury, I think, of approaching our choices of how to live our lives according to what seems like it will work at this point, because certainly if you have that calculation, you won't do much at all. But rather, I think we have an imperative to live our lives as best we can on behalf of, taking care of our families, our communities, and our world. And it can be enormously rewarding to do that. And whether or not we succeed.
And the question, I guess, is that we have to confront our denial or confront our fears and work our way together through those things.
Yeah, and I think we don't really have a choice but to do otherwise. And I think that living all of us have a desire to live a meaningful life. We actually have culturally a lot of grand narratives about coming up against insurmountable odds. Think about people like Joseph Conrad have to say about these kinds of things, about the power of these mythic struggles. Well, we're in one now, and whether or not we know what's going to happen next, the most meaningful life that we can live can be one that is being engaged, and being engaged in our communities, being engaged in our schools, being engaged in our political institutions. Is there
a new book coming?
Yes, I am it's very different than Living in Denial, but I have just finished a manuscript, and it'll be another year probably before it is entirely out. But the tentative title is Salmon Feeds Our People, and it is about the work I've been doing on the Klamath, and it's more speaking to the discipline of sociology, but it'll be broadly applicable about Indigenous worldviews and traditional knowledge and what those have to contribute to the academia.
Nice. I look forward to it. I guess the question I always like to ask last is there something we haven't talked about that we should have?
I mean, I think one thing that we didn't discuss is, what it is that people can do, and sort of the situation that we're in, which is that no matter what we do, it will not feel like enough, and it may in fact not be enough. That when it comes to climate change, we have to be cognizant on the one hand that we're talking about a very large collective problem that really does require, if not everyone to be mobilized, a large number of people to be mobilized. And from that point, all of us are in different social locations, and so there are different things that we can do. And in fact, there are many, many things that we can do. And so, what someone can do who is a teacher versus what someone can do who is works on a construction site, or what someone can do, who has access to medical communities, or whatever the social networks that we have and the kinds of political opportunities that we have because of those social networks are unique for each of us. But it does matter that people speak publicly, even having conversations with your friends, or writing letters to the editor of newspapers. Anything that helps to make climate change visible helps us to have a richer conversation about what can be done and what needs to be done. And often starting in the local community can be very very valuable, learning more about what climate impacts are predicted in your community and figuring out how to think about how to mitigate those. And certainly, I think large-scale political action is very necessary, obviously, in the United States. It really matters what's coming out of the White House in terms of messaging and policy.
Kari, I really want to thank you for taking time to join us today. It's been a wonderful hour and very informative. I wish you all the best in your newest book and all your efforts.
Thank you for bringing attention to an extremely important topic. And thanks to your listeners for everything that they're doing.
Dr. Kari Norgaard has been our guest today. She's the author of Living in Denial, Climate Change, Emotions, and Everyday Life. That's another edition of the Conversation Lab. This radio program and podcast is produced by CFRO FM in Vancouver's downtown east side on the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Our gratitude and thanks to them, as well as the many not-for-profit organizations and community groups for their support. If you enjoyed this program, please consider becoming a member of Co-op Radio to help support programs like these. If you know anyone or an organization with a story to share, please let them know about us. We can be found at coopradio.org, theconversationlab.ca, and on many social media and podcasting platforms. Kimit Sekon, John Massacar, and Julian Anton have helped produce this program. Thanks, guys, and thank you for dropping by the Conversation Lab.